The worst thing that can happen in the learning life of a kid, the number one most reverse effect that can happen is when they change schools. It's the worst thing that can happen. And I worked at 100 LCAPs in California, 100 school districts, randomly selected LCAPs. Not one of them addressed mobility. The worst thing that can happen in kids' learning. So you're going to start on Thursday meeting kids, you're going to set all the cultural expectations, you're going to set all these routines, and you're going to love them up, and you're going to welcome them and all this stuff. When I was a student teacher, my supervisor said to me, "And don't smile until Christmas." That is terrible advice. That's terrible advice. Kids want to know you care about them. Smile at them on Thursday. You're not ruining them because you were nice to them. Right? Now you're going to do all that stuff on Thursday and Friday and set up the routines, but what happens 3 weeks from now when a new kid enrolls in your school? Think about that. What are you going to do to make sure that kid is welcome? The evidence says that if a child says, "I have a close personal friend," within 3 weeks of enrolling in the new school, the impact of mobility is cut in half. 3 weeks. There's something about schools that make sure kids are connected immediately that reduces the negative impact of mobility. And some of you work in schools in Salinas that have high mobility, and some of you don't. So I'll flash back. I taught at Rosa Parks Elementary School for 9 years. This really rich man gave us $18 million, and one of the conditions he said is you had to be their teacher for the entire time they're in elementary school. I happened to teach kindergarten at the time. There were 18 kindergarten teachers. We had about 1,900 kids at our campus.
Wow.
Biggest elementary school in California. At Rosa Parks, that's why I worked there. There were 18 full-time kindergarten teachers, and we agreed to be those teachers. Kinder, first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. Same kids. For $18 million, wouldn't you do that? Yeah. Poor school at $18 million. So we did it. Turns out the math gets really hard in 4th grade. Wow. And he hired us a math coach to teach us math. And I learned to be a better math teacher because of Mario. And the interesting thing about the research says you shouldn't departmentalize in upper elementary school. And I know it's popular now to have a math teacher in 4th grade or 5th grade, but the research says that's a bad idea because you destroy the relationships that kids need when they're in 4th grade and 5th grade. And there's good studies on that. There's also really good studies that you can change achievement of kids if the same teacher keeps the kid for 2 years. There's very good evidence on this. But it's more convenient for the adults to teach the same grade every year. So we don't implement the evidence. Getting kids to read things over again. Good for them. They hate it. So I've been thinking about this a lot. Why do I keep hearing people say, the kids hate to reread? So I was hanging out in some primary grade classrooms doing something else, and I noticed some behaviors. How many of you own your own 5-year-old? Have you ever owned one? Did that little person love to reread the same book over and over again? Mm-hmm. To the point you want to shove a pencil in your eye? I don't care what Brown Bear saw. Please don't make me read this again. Yep. And you remember that night when you were kind of tired? And the little eyes started to close, so you skipped 4 pages of the book? Remember that? And those little eyes popped right back open and you got in trouble. Start over, right? Ask any kindergarten teacher, they have never met a 5-year-old who doesn't love to reread. Never. Parents send us kids who love to reread. We give them back kids who hate to reread. Stop blaming the parents. It's us, not them. So I started noticing some behaviors. Well-meaning teachers in the primary grades, during independent reading, say to a kid, "You already read that book, pick a different one." Imagine your beloved teacher, when you are 5 years old, says to you 200, 300 times over the course of the school year, "Pick a different book, you already read that one." What do you start to say to yourself? Rereading's bad. So I beg you, this school year, Flashback Friday, Throwback Thursday, I don't care what you call it. If you teach K1-2, at least once a week, let kids read familiar books. Ask them why they're reading at this time. What did they get out of this time? What's the purpose for reading at this time? What did they notice this time that they didn't notice last time? and build a rereading habit with your kids. And when you do a shared reading, a read aloud, a think aloud, don't close the book, because it sends the message to kids that you have to remember everything after one access point to the book. When you do a shared reading or a read aloud, go back to the text a couple times and show those kids in the primary grades that you reread as well. And I promise you, in a few years, those third graders and fourth graders will not hate to reread, because their primary grade teachers didn't accidentally send a message against rereading. It's really good for you. And by the way, those of you who work with older kids, we have really good research evidence that says if you reread a high-stakes test, have you heard of the Smarter Balanced? Do you remember that? I know you were scarred and traumatized from last spring, but there was a test that we gave called the Smarter Balanced. There is evidence that if kids learn to reread on high-stakes tests, they will do better. If they hate to reread, they're not going to suddenly say, hey, it's March or April or May, whenever you administer, I think I'll reread on this test on the computer of really hard pieces of text. They don't say that to themselves unless you build the habit all year long. So I think when you walk in a classroom on Thursday, we look at the students, we look at the teacher, we look at the content being taught. And when you put those together, we focus on growth-producing humane relationships. We work really hard at developing relationships because all learning is social. Everything kids are learning, every interaction they have with you, they're learning about themselves, their identity, their agency, or they're learning they're not a worthy human being. Second, we are very clear in what we want kids to learn and what success looks like. And third, we design tasks that create challenge for our students. Those three things have the potential to radically change your students' learning and thus their achievement. With that, I say thank you for your time. Have a great school year.